October 10th, 1931, 9:47 a.m., Federal Courthouse, Chicago. Michael Malone pressed the button for the 5th floor. The elevator lurched upward. His hands were steady, his face calm, but his heart was pounding like a jackhammer. 4 days ago, his cover got blown. 18 months of living a lie, sleeping 50 feet from the most dangerous gangster in America, playing poker with killers, shooting craps with enforcers, all while gathering the evidence that was right now destroying Al Capone in a courtroom upstairs. The elevator stopped. 3rd floor. The doors slid open. And there he was, Al Capone. Standing in the elevator car with 2 defense lawyers and a federal marshal. Impeccable grey suit, silk tie, diamond pinky ring catching the light. The man Malone had known for a year and a half as Mike Lupito, the Philadelphia gangster on the run. The doors started to close. Capone's hand shot out, stopped them. His eyes locked on Malone. 30 seconds of absolute silence. The lawyers realized what was happening. The marshal's hand moved toward his gun. Capone just stared, his mind working through it all. The birthday party at the Lexington Hotel, the craps games, the drinks at the bar, the conversations about business, about money, about the Chicago operation generating millions in cash every month. Every word, every laugh, every handshake, all of it reported to the Treasury Department. Capone's voice came out eerily calm, more terrifying than anger. Mike Lupito, from Philadelphia. He paused, studying Malone's face like he was seeing it for the first time. Except you're not. Are you? Malone said nothing, just held eye contact. No fear. Not anymore. Capone nodded slowly, almost respectfully. The only thing that fooled me was your looks. You took your chances, and I took mine. I lost. The elevator continued up. 5th floor. The doors opened. Capone walked out toward the courtroom where an 11-year prison sentence was waiting for him. He turned back one last time. You got brass. I'll give you that. The doors closed. Malone exhaled for what felt like the first time in 18 months. But here's what nobody understands. What the history books gloss over. What even Capone didn't fully grasp in that moment. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. What just happened in that elevator was the end result of the most audacious undercover operation in American history. And the man who pulled it off, an Irish kid from Jersey City who looked Italian enough to fool the mob, had walked into Al Capone's fortress in 1929 with nothing but a fake name and a death wish. To understand how Michael Malone got into that elevator, how he survived 18 months inside the Chicago outfit, how he gathered the intelligence that would topple an empire, you need to go back to where it all started. December 1928, Washington, D.C., when the President of the United States personally ordered the impossible. December 1928, Treasury Department Headquarters, Washington, D.C. President Herbert Hoover had a problem, and his name was Alphonse Capone, public enemy number 1, the man who controlled Chicago like a personal fiefdom. $100 million a year flowing through bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, cops on the payroll, judges in his pocket, politicians taking his cash and looking the other way. Traditional law enforcement had failed, witnesses disappeared, juries got bribed, evidence disappeared. Nobody could touch Capone. He walked the streets like he owned them. Because he did. Elmer Eyre, chief of the Treasury Department's intelligence unit, presented a radical solution: tax evasion. The 1927 Supreme Court had ruled that criminal income was taxable. Capone lived in luxury, spent money like water, but reported zero income to the Internal Revenue Service. Get him on taxes. But there was a problem. Proving Capone's income without inside access was impossible. Eyre needed someone to get close, to infiltrate, to gather financial intelligence from inside the Chicago outfit. He needed Michael Malone. Born October 21st, 1893, Jersey City, New Jersey. Irish immigrant's kid. Mother died when he was 12. His older sister Molly raised him on streets where Italian, Yiddish, Greek, and Gaelic mixed like languages in a saloon. Malone absorbed them all. Dark hair, olive skin, deep-set eyes with shadows beneath. Black Irish. He looked more Italian than half the Italians in Chicago, and that was exactly what Irie needed. Malone had earned his nickname, Mysterious Mike, the hard way. Undercover work in Philadelphia, San Francisco, posing as gangsters, garbage men, construction workers. He'd been jailed to build his cover stories. He'd mastered disguises before anyone else in federal law enforcement understood their value. World War I flying reconnaissance had given him nerves of steel and an understanding that every mission could be his last. The mission was simple in theory, impossible in execution. Get into Capone's inner circle, live there, gather evidence about spending, income sources, financial operations, however long it takes. And here's what made it truly terrifying once Malone went in. He was alone. No backup. No support team waiting outside. If his cover got blown, Capone would have him eliminated as a message to anyone else who thought about infiltrating the Chicago outfit. But before Malone could walk into Capone's world, he needed to become someone else entirely. Someone with a backstory Capone's paranoid security could verify. Someone connected enough to warrant respect, but not ambitious enough to threaten Capone's power. Someone Capone would never suspect. January through August 1929. The transformation began. A group of wealthy Chicago businessmen called the Secret Six donated $10,000 for the operation. Malone needed to look the part of a successful gangster. Silk suits from Wanamaker's department store, monogrammed shirts, the initials ML, not MM, fedoras, silk underwear. Every detail perfect because Capone's men would check everything. The identity, Mike Lupito, Philadelphia gangster on the run from a burglary charge. To make it authentic, Malone traveled to Philadelphia, connected with mob boss Max Boo Boo Hoff. Hoff, thinking Malone was just another criminal, taught him the underworld's authentic mannerisms, speech patterns, the subtle codes that separated real gangsters from imposters. Malone established contacts in Philadelphia who would receive letters and write back. Knowing Capone's men would intercept and read every word, the plan was psychological warfare. Check into the Lexington Hotel at 2135 South Michigan Avenue, Capone's fortress. 300 rooms. Capone owned the upper floors. Every employee on his payroll. Bulletproof doors. Escape routes. Armed guards. A Western Union office in the lobby where Malone could track who sent telegrams and when. Malone would take room 724, right next to Phil DeAndrea, Capone's personal bodyguard. He'd spend days in the lobby reading newspapers, establishing his presence, noting every face, every movement. And then he'd let Capone's paranoia do the work. Let them break into his room. Let them find the expensive clothes, the monogrammed underwear, the letters from Philadelphia. Let them investigate. Because when Capone's security cleared him, the trust would be absolute. August 1929. Mike Lupito walked into the Lexington Hotel. He would live there, steps from Al Capone, for the next 18 months. And every single day could be his last. August 19th, 1929, Day 3 at the Lexington Hotel. Mike Lupito left room 724 at precisely 10 a.m., walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, stayed 90 minutes, long enough for Capone's men to make their move. They picked the lock, searched everything, the checkered suits hanging in the closet, Wanamaker's labels still visible, the silk underwear in the dresser, monogrammed ML, the letters from Philadelphia stacked on the nightstand, written in underworld slang that only genuine criminals would recognize. They opened every drawer, checked under the mattress, examined the bathroom for hidden compartments. Nothing suspicious. No badges, no government identification, no evidence of law enforcement. Just an expensive wardrobe and correspondence from the Philadelphia underworld. Report back to Capone looks legitimate. That evening, Malone sat in the lobby reading the Chicago Tribune. A man in a sharp suit approached, sat down uninvited. One of Capone's lieutenants. "What's your business in Chicago? Direct, no pleasantries." Malone looked up, Italian accent perfect. "Keeping quiet." The message was clear. Laying low from Philadelphia heat. The lieutenant nodded, understanding the code. They talked. Drinks. Small talk that wasn't small at all. Probing questions disguised as conversation. Malone revealed his backstory piece by piece. Burglary charge. Need to disappear for a while. Philadelphia getting too hot. 2 nights later, the invitation came. Craps game in Capone's private room. This was the test. Malone played conservatively. Lost $300. A believable amount. Used the gambling terminology he'd learned from Boo Boo Hoff. Spoke Italian with the Chicago outfit members. Shared stories about Philadelphia operations. Laughed at their jokes. By midnight, they'd accepted him. One of us. Over the next 3 months, Malone became a fixture. Poker games twice a week. Gossip sessions about Chicago operations. He never asked questions, just listened. Let information flow naturally. And every piece of intelligence, every overhead conversation about money, gambling income, numbers rackets, Malone memorized, late at night, from a secure phone booth 6 blocks from the Lexington. He'd call Frank Wilson, the lead Treasury investigator, report everything. Wilson's team traced signatures on checks, linked transactions to Capone's operations, tracked Western Union transmissions Malone documented, names of bagmen, collectors, enforcers, conversations about the Hawthorne Kennel Club dog track generating millions, political payoffs, all of it building toward an airtight case. But every night, alone in room 724, Malone lay in bed with his .38 Special under the pillow, hearing laughter from Capone's suite down the hall. He was living inside the beast. One mistake, one slip of the accent, one wrong answer to a probing question, and he'd never leave that hotel alive. December 1929, 3 months in, Malone had their trust. And then came the invitation that changed everything. Frank Nitty's birthday party, exclusive, only Capone's closest associates. Mike Lupito was invited, which meant Malone was about to meet Al Capone face to face. The party at the Lexington Hotel, December 1929. Capone arrived fashionably late, impeccable navy suit, diamond cufflinks catching the chandelier light. He made the rounds, greeting everyone personally. Machine Gun, Jack McGurn, Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, Murray the Camel Humphreys, Paul the Waiter Rika, and then he stopped, right in front of Mike Lupito. Mike Lupito, right from Philadelphia. Malone nodded. Firm handshake. "That's right, Mr. Capone." Capone smiled. "Any friend of Boo Boo Hoff's is welcome here." 5 minutes of conversation. Philly stories, mutual acquaintances, the kind of small talk that meant everything. Then Capone moved on. But that was it. Malone was in. Over the next year, Malone attended regular gatherings, heard Capone discuss business openly, the Chicago operation generating over $100 million annually, illegal income never reported to the Internal Revenue Service, Capone bragging about owning judges, cops, entire political machines. Every word was evidence, every conversation another nail in the coffin. One night, a suspicious lieutenant cornered Malone. "I checked with Philadelphia. Nobody remembers you." Malone didn't flinch. "That's the point. I kept my head down, unlike you loudmouths." The room erupted in laughter. Tension broke, but Malone knew. He'd almost died right there. Spring 1930. Frank Wilson assigned Malone a critical task. Find Frank Nitti. Capone's enforcer had skipped town after his indictment. Malone followed Nitty's wife for 6 hours through Chicago traffic. She drove to Berwyn, Illinois, to an apartment building. Next day, Malone blocked her car next to a fire hydrant, Pulled the alarm. Fire department arrived. Checked the license plate. Police raided the apartment. Nitti arrested. 18 months in prison for tax evasion. Major victory. But Malone had to maintain his cover. Act surprised. Act like he had nothing to do with it. Late 1930. Malone overheard something that made his blood run cold. Capone had hired 5 New York gunmen. Assassination contracts. Targets Frank Wilson, Special Agent A, P, Madden, U, S, Attorney George Johnson, Investigator P, F, Roche, $25,000 each. Malone reported it immediately. Federal officials implemented security measures. Capone, seeing the protection, cancelled the contracts. Too much heat. March 1931. Grand jury indicted Capone on 23 counts of tax evasion. June. Capone posted $50,000 bail, returned to the Lexington triumphant. Mike Lupito was there to congratulate him. And that's when Malone overheard the jury-fixing scheme. Capone had spent $100,000 bribing jurors. Malone called Wilson. Judge James Wilkerson switched to an entirely new jury pool at the last second. Capone's bribes wasted. October 6, 1931. Trial began. Capone expected acquittal. His lawyers had fixed every trial before this one. But 4 days in, Treasury pulled Malone from his undercover role. Time to reveal himself. Walking to the courthouse elevator, Malone knew what was coming. The doors opened. Al Capone stood there. And in that moment, everything changed. Inside that courtroom, 18 months of Malone's intelligence destroyed Al Capone. Prosecution presented evidence gathered by Frank Wilson's team. Ledgers, receipts, witness testimonies. Malone's name never mentioned publicly. His role classified. But every piece of evidence traced back to conversations he'd overheard, transactions he'd documented, names he'd memorized while shooting craps with killers. Capone's spending told the story. Custom suits, lavish parties, homes, cars. Total provable income from 1924 to 1929 over $1 million. Reported income to the Internal Revenue Service zero. Mid-trial. Phil DeAndrea, Capone's bodyguard. Malone's former next-door neighbor in room 723, tried entering the courtroom. Security checkpoint. Malone and another agent frisked him. Concealed pistol. Arrested on the spot. Malone's final contribution to the case. October 24th, 1931. 8 hours of deliberation. Guilty verdict. 22 counts of tax evasion. Capone's face went blank. 32 years old. His empire crumbling in real time. Sentence 11 years federal prison. $50,000 fine. $215,000 in court costs. May 3rd, 1932. Capone transferred to Atlanta Penitentiary, later Alcatraz. He was released in 1939. Health destroyed by illness. Died in 1947, age 48, in Florida. Broken. Forgotten. The man who once controlled Chicago ended his life as a cautionary tale. And Michael Malone. He disappeared back into the shadows. Continued undercover work for 30 more years. Dutch Schultz, Waxy Gordon, Nucky Johnson. The inspiration for Boardwalk Empire. The Lindbergh kidnapping in 1932. Helping track ransom bills that led to Bruno Hauptmann's arrest. 40-year career. Dozens of major criminals convicted. Always under aliases. Pat O'Rourke. Mike Lupito. Names his own family didn't know. November 10th, 1960. Malone died at 67. Brain aneurysm. Still an active Internal Revenue Service agent. Buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Few mourners. Most didn't know his real work. His secret life remained secret until his great-nephew, Marty Dolan, discovered boxes in his grandmother's attic in the 2000s. Official reports, handwritten notes, photographs. The entire story of mysterious Mike Malone, the man who lived next door to Al Capone and brought down an empire. Here's what Capone allegedly said about Malone to his defense attorney. "You look more wop than most wops. grudging admiration for the deception. But Capone never publicly spoke about the betrayal. Too humiliating. The lesson: Eliot Ness raided 19 breweries, cost Capone $1 million. Malone sat in a hotel lobby reading newspapers, cost Capone his freedom. Intelligence beat violence. Patience beat force. One man willing to become someone else completely, to sleep with a gun under his pillow for 18 months, to live the lie so thoroughly that even the smartest gangster in America never suspected. Before Malone, law enforcement attacked the mob with raids and arrests. After Malone, intelligence gathering became the primary weapon. Follow the money became the mantra. Tax law proved easier to enforce than criminal law. The Treasury Intelligence Unit's success inspired the FBI's undercover programs, modern organized crime task forces, even the RICO statutes in 1970. But here's what most people don't know. Most people recognize Eliot Ness from The Untouchables. Few know Michael Malone despite his greater contribution. No movies, no books until recently, no recognition. He died relatively unknown outside the intelligence community. Marty Dolan is campaigning for the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his great-uncle. The Mob Museum in Las Vegas features exhibits with Malone's artifacts. The gun he slept with, his credentials, handwritten reports, trying to give this forgotten hero his due. In 1929, one Irish kid from Jersey City walked into the Lexington Hotel. 18 months later, he walked out having toppled an empire, not with a gun, with patience, intelligence, and absolute commitment to the lie. That's not just history, that's legendary.